as it's already been suggested many times, every story is our story, and every character, an archetype and symbol in those stories represents an aspect of our self. There's a story already told, a Sufi allegory, that has asked a question that has yet to be answered. It's a story about a young boy called Rakim. Rakim was born into an impoverished family of shepherds. But it was very obvious to everyone from the earliest age that Rakim had exceptional qualities, exceptional intelligence. So the townspeople, recognizing that there was someone amongst them who had possibilities to excel, they gathered together and bought the means for him to be sent to an academy, where he did indeed excel. But after graduation, he was taken into the employ of the Sultan himself, and very quickly rose up amongst the ranks until he became the Grand Vizier, the advisor to the Sultan himself. But there were many in that court who were jealous of Rakim, and they wanted to bring about his downfall. So they plotted, but they observed him, and then they went to the Sultan and said to the Sultan that they had seen Rakim every day go to a locked room where they said that they thought that he was counting the gold that he'd stolen from the Sultan's coffers. Now, the Sultan held Rakim in very high esteem and did not want to believe that this was true of him, but he had to follow it through. So he gave authority for these advisors and others to break down the door of this room and find out what it contained. But when they came back to the Sultan, somewhat chastened, they handed to him the contents of that room. It was a parcel containing a homespun cloak and a pair of straw sandals. Now the Sultan called Rakim to him and said what was the meaning of this. Rakim, with tears in his eyes, related that before he left his humble home, his mother had made a parcel of his homespun cloak and his straw sandals, telling him, "Son, these are to remind you of from whence you came, so that I would always remain humble." Now, tears ran down the face of the Sultan himself, because now Rakim was even more beloved of him. He wasn't just a clever advisor. So from that moment, the Sultan wanted to have Rakim with him every moment. Even when the Sultan in the afternoon went to his inner sanctum with guards outside the door to have a rest, he insisted that he do so with his head on Rakim's knee. But one day, at that time, something happened. Because as the Sultan's head rested on Rakim's knee, a being appeared before them, a being like a young man wearing white. But before this, there were several events that occurred, and they were one. That one day the Sultan and Rakim were walking in the garden in the middle of winter time. The snow was on the ground, but when the Sultan looked up, there was a single flower growing out of the side of the wall. And he said, "I want that flower." And Rakim said to the Sultan, "Climb on my shoulders and you'll be able to reach it." But the Sultan said, "No, no, 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 no. You climb on my shoulders." But while Rakim was on the Sultan's shoulders, he had a thought. He said to himself, "Look at me, a simple shepherd boy standing on the shoulders of the Shah and Shah of the world." The second incident was when a visiting ambassador came, and the Sultan ordered him to have a reception for this ambassador. And afterwards people said that the entertainment was better than what the Sultan could do. And Rakim himself had stood in front of the mirror with his Grand Vizier's hat on and his wonderful attire, and thought to himself, "Look at you, Grand Vizier of the Sultan of the world." But then back to the incident where the being appeared in front of Rakim. And Rakim, of course, was shocked. How did anyone get through the guarded doors? And he accosted him, "Who are you and how did you get in there?" And the being said to Rakim, "I am your luck, and I'm here to tell you that I'm going to sleep." After this, of course, Rakim took out from his belt the dagger that every Grand Vizier had, about to attack this interloper. But the interloper had disappeared, and in that very moment the Sultan woke up and found his Grand Vizier with the dagger over his body. The only thought he could have was that his beloved Vizier was going to assassinate him. So, of course, he called the guards, and Rakim was summarily taken off to the dungeons. And, of course, the price for this was death. But deep in the Sultan's heart, he loved and revered Rakim. So he could not bear to follow through, to have him killed, his head lopped. So instead, he banished him from the kingdom. Rakim was taken to the far reaches of the edges of the Sultan's realm and left penniless there. He roamed aimlessly for some time until he was taken in by a farmer who needed someone to help him thresh the wheat and grind the grains. So taking this position, Rakim worked from day to night, falling exhausted to sleep after each day of toil. 7 years passed, and Rakim served the farmer well, undertaking every task that was given him willingly, although it broke his back and caused his fingers to be gnarled. But then, one night, after those 7 years, Rakim was woken from his sleep by the being, the young being in the white robes, who said, "I've come to tell you that I have woken up." And on that very night, on that very same night, the Sultan had a dream where this young being came to him and said, "Your kingdom has been languishing these 7 years. Find Hakim and return him to his rightful place." And so it was that messengers were sent out to find Hakim, and after some time, of course, they found him at the far reaches of the kingdom, now withered. But he was taken back to the palace with great pomp and ceremony, and welcomed back by the Sultan, who placed him back into his rightful place as his trusted advisor and grand vizier. So the question that was asked before, and the question that is asked now, recognizing from this allegory, it is our story. Every aspect of it is a representation of ourself. Every symbol, every number has meaning for us in our life and the cycles of life. But now the question is asked, what is luck for us? What is the meaning of luck in this story? From your experience, from your life, what is luck? Or what does it represent in our life and in this story?